ये स्क्रिप्ट मैं डायरेक्टली टेक्स्ट फॉर्मेट में लिखता हूँ, सेम टोन, स्ट्रक्चर, नंबर्ड फैक्ट्स, लॉन्ग पैराग्राफ्स, स्ट्रॉन्ग हुक के साथ, एग्जैक्टली जैसे ओरिजिनल है. The rewritten script, 2200 plus words. The sirens never went off. A missile traveled 160 kilometers through Israeli airspace, struck a satellite communications facility in the heart of the country, and not a single alarm sounded before it hit. Not one. The Israeli Home Front Command, the entire system built specifically to warn civilians of incoming fire, did not activate. People living in the surrounding area of the Ela Valley had no warning, no time to move, no time to react. The explosion happened before anyone knew it was coming, and when the Israeli Defense Forces finally responded publicly, they called it an isolated failure. That phrase, isolated failure, is doing an enormous amount of work right now to cover something that is not isolated at all. What happened on March 9th at the SCES Hela satellite station is not a footnote in this war. It is the defining operational moment of the Northern Front. And the Northern Front is the second war that nobody in the official world wants to formally acknowledge has already begun. The facility that was struck is not a military installation. It is a privatized civilian commercial site housing more than 80 parabolic antennas, ranging from small dishes to 32-meter structures. It is one of Israel's primary ground gateways, linking communication satellites in orbit to terrestrial networks, handling satellite broadcasting, broadband data relay, and the encrypted communications backbone of a country currently fighting a war on multiple fronts simultaneously. Hezbollah claimed the site belonged to Israel's military communications and cyber defense division. That specific claim is factually wrong, but the strategic logic underneath the claim is not wrong at all. Destroy those antennas and Israel's ability to coordinate, relay, broadcast, and manage its command networks degrades in real time. That is not a random target. That is a precision strategic strike against the nervous system of Israeli defense architecture. What is actually happening in the north right now, as of day 12 of this war, is the following. Since March 2nd, UNIFIL has confirmed that over 210 Hezbollah missiles have been fired into Israel. The accuracy of recent strikes, according to Israeli military analysts cited in multiple Hebrew language outlets, has improved substantially compared to any previous Hezbollah campaign in the organization's history. Hezbollah is not firing the mass rocket barrages it used in 2006. It has changed its strategy completely. According to Channel 12 reporting citing senior Israeli officials, Hezbollah is deliberately and methodically targeting strategic facilities, communications infrastructure, warning systems, and military command nodes with high-accuracy missiles designed not to overwhelm Israel's defenses through sheer volume, but to dismantle the architecture that makes Israeli defense possible in the first place. That is a fundamentally different kind of war than anything Israel's northern defense doctrine was built to handle. Israel responded to Hezbollah's entry into this conflict immediately. Hundreds of targets struck across Lebanon. Ground troops pushed into southern border areas. Beirut's southern suburbs hit repeatedly. The Lebanese government has confirmed that Israeli attacks have killed at least 486 people in Lebanon since March 2nd and wounded over 1,300. Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich's own son was seriously wounded near the Lebanese border in ground operations. The costs on both sides are real, documented, and escalating. But the central operational question is not about casualties. It is about whether the exchange rate of this northern front favors Israel's long-term defensive position or systematically degrades it. Based on what Hezbollah demonstrated on March 9th, the answer is increasingly clear. The warning system problem is now the central tactical crisis of this war, and it is getting worse in a specific traceable sequence. Before this war began, the Israeli warning system gave civilians approximately 15 minutes to reach shelter when Iranian missiles were launched from Iran. Enough time to move, to act, to make decisions. As the war progressed and Iran shifted to faster trajectories and shorter-range platforms, that window shrank to 2 minutes or less. Then Hezbollah began firing from Lebanon, a distance measured in dozens of kilometers rather than hundreds. And in the case of the Ela Valley strike, the warning window was 0. The missile arrived before the system could process its trajectory, calculate impact coordinates, and activate the sirens. The IDF's statement that this was an isolated failure is technically defensible in the narrow sense that not every Hezbollah missile has arrived without warning. But it is strategically misleading in a way that matters enormously, because what Hezbollah demonstrated is that its capability to penetrate Israeli warning systems is not theoretical, not a possibility, not a concern for future planning. It happened, at 160 kilometers range, at a critical infrastructure facility, without any warning to the surrounding civilian population. And it will happen again. Now examine the interceptor mathematics, because this is where the second war and the first war are directly connected in ways that the official language on both sides is working hard not to describe clearly. Israel's layered air defense, Iron Dome, Patriot PAC-2 and PAC-3, David's Sling, and Arrow was built and maintained on a specific strategic assumption. The assumption was that missile threats would arrive in manageable volumes over manageable periods of time, allowing interceptor stockpiles to be replenished between engagements. The June 2025 12-day war consumed interceptors at rates that alarmed both Israel and the Pentagon. The current war has now run continuously for 12 days with Iranian ballistic missiles, Iranian drones, Hezbollah precision missiles, cluster warheads, and swarm attacks all arriving simultaneously against a defense system that burns interceptors with every single engagement. The United States was already confirmed before this war began to be shipping Patriot interceptor components from South Korea to the Middle East, drawing down the defense assets of an ally to replenish an active war theater. Every interceptor fired at an Iranian missile over Tel Aviv is one interceptor that is no longer available to protect a U.S. base in Bahrain, a Gulf oil facility, or a South Korean city from a North Korean launch. The depletion mathematics are not theoretical. They are the central operational constraint of this war, and they are worsening every day. Hezbollah understands this arithmetic with precision. Israeli officials confirmed to Channel 12 that Hezbollah's strategic calculation in the current campaign is explicit. It is not trying to destroy Israel through mass rocket fire. It is running a war of coordinated attrition designed around three simultaneous objectives. First, drain Israel's interceptor stockpiles through sustained, multi-directional precision pressure. Second, destroy the early warning infrastructure that gives those interceptors their targeting data. Third, do both from Lebanon, while Iran simultaneously drains those same systems from the east. Destroy the satellite communication station and the network that coordinates Israel's air defense degrades. Destroy the warning system and interceptors fire late or fail to fire at all. Drain the stockpile and eventually missiles land uncontested because there is nothing left to intercept them. That is the technical architecture of a war of attrition being executed from two directions simultaneously by two actors who are coordinating around a shared operational goal. Iran's side of this equation has its own compounding pressure. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, described by analysts as one of the more measured voices inside the Iranian government, stated publicly this week that Iran will continue firing missiles until the last of its capacity is expended. The IRGC confirmed that drone and missile production facilities are running double shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Iran's underground command and control infrastructure, estimated at 31 hardened facilities buried beyond the penetration range of conventional munitions, remains fully operational. Every American and Israeli airstrike that has targeted Iranian missile launch infrastructure has degraded launch capacity. It has not eliminated command authority. It has not shut down the industrial base producing new weapons. And it has not reached the facilities that matter most because those facilities are underground in locations that current conventional air power cannot reach. Israel has been pressing Washington for something it has not yet received, which is ground troops on Iranian soil. The calculation in Jerusalem is that aerial bombardment alone cannot reach the command centers, cannot stop the factories, and cannot produce the regime collapse that was the original strategic objective when this operation launched on February 28th. Ground forces could theoretically accomplish what airstrikes cannot. The problem is that Iran has stated explicitly, through its foreign minister, through its president, through the IRGC leadership, that it has been preparing for exactly that scenario for decades. Its network of underground tunnels, fortified defensive positions, and dispersed military infrastructure was built specifically to make a ground campaign catastrophically costly for any invading force. And now there is a third front preparing to open. Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi declared publicly this week that his fighters have their hands on the trigger. He described Yemen's potential entry into the war as something that could happen at any moment. The Atlantic Council confirmed that the Houthis possess the geographic and military capacity to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at the southern end of the Red Sea, which would mean closing a second global maritime choke point simultaneously with Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz in the east. Hormuz is already effectively shut. 15 million barrels of oil per day stranded, 150 ships anchored and waiting outside it. If the Houthis close the Red Sea, the economic mathematics of this war change completely for every government on the planet, not just the ones with troops in the theater. There is a detail about the night Khamenei was killed that no official Israeli or American statement has adequately processed. When the United States and Israel struck Tehran on February 28th and announced that Iran's supreme leader was dead, there were no celebrations in the streets of Tel Aviv. In a country that had lived under Iranian proxy threat for decades, that had endured Hezbollah rockets in 2006, Iranian drone swarms in 2024, and the 12-day war in June 2025, the death of the man who had directed and funded every single one of those campaigns should have produced exactly the kind of national relief and public euphoria that governments go to war to generate. It did not. Israelis did not go into the streets, they went into shelters, they knew what was coming. That absence of public celebration is more revealing about the current state of Israeli morale than any government press conference or military briefing. A population that instinctively understands that killing the enemy's leader does not end the war, it begins the retaliation, is a population that has already absorbed a truth that its leadership is still publicly working around. This war does not have a clean finish line. 12 days after Khamenei's death, with Iranian missiles still incoming and Hezbollah striking satellite stations without warning, that instinct has been confirmed in every direction. The civilian situation inside Israel now has no precedent in the country's modern history. BBC analysis this week described the situation in terms that no official Israeli government statement has used. Partial lockdown, streets empty, shops closed, beaches shuttered, a country of 9.5 million people effectively suspended in war posture, unable to maintain normal economic activity, unable to sleep through the night, unable to trust that the shelter system will protect them after Hezbollah demonstrated that missiles can arrive with zero warning time. The economic consequences are already documented and compounding. Workers across Israel reported significant income losses even before this war began, after 2 years of grinding conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah following October 2023. Those losses are now multiplying in real time with no clear endpoint. Airlines have suspended schedules. Tourism does not exist. Foreign investment is paused. The 2026 state budget has not been passed. And if it is not passed by March 31st, the Israeli government falls by its own constitutional rules without anyone firing another shot. Iran calculated all of this before the first missile was launched. IRGC strategic documents confirmed through intelligence reporting were explicit about the objective. The goal was not to defeat Israel militarily in the short term through overwhelming force. The goal was to make Israeli society unsustainable at war, drain its interceptors, destroy its warning infrastructure, empty its streets, collapse its economy, divide it from its American patron, open enough simultaneous fronts that no single military response could address all of them at once. On day 12, that strategy is running exactly as Iran designed it. And now consider the man at the center of this. Donald Trump campaigned on a specific and repeatedly stated promise: no new wars. He said it in every formulation across 2 years of public statements. He would end conflicts, he would bring troops home, he would make deals. He would not be the president who started a war. On February 28, 2026, the United States jointly launched what has become the largest American military operation in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 12 days later, American soldiers are dead. U.S. bases across 6 countries have been struck by Iranian missiles and drones. The U.S. Navy has publicly acknowledged it cannot guarantee protection for commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And American interceptor stockpiles are being drawn from South Korea to sustain a theater that was described as a short-term excursion. Every major public commitment Trump made about the shape of this war has been contradicted by the war itself. Israeli media has now reported explicitly that senior Israeli officials are gaming out the scenario in which the United States, facing market pressure, domestic political constraints, and a military operation with no visible endpoint, announces a unilateral withdrawal. If that happens, Israel would face Iran, Hezbollah, and potentially the Houthis without the American air power, interceptor resupply lines, and naval presence that has been the foundation of its defense architecture since February 28th. That is not a theoretical risk being discussed in think tanks. It is the central strategic anxiety of the Israeli government right now. The satellite dishes in the Ela Valley are rubble. The sirens did not sound. Hezbollah fired a missile 160 kilometers into the center of Israel, and the warning system did not activate. And on every front across the Middle East, the next missile is already loaded, already aimed, already waiting. This is not an isolated failure. This is the architecture of a second war running simultaneously inside the first one, and nobody with official authority on any side has yet said that out loud.